Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to my video game reviews. In today's video, we should be discussing my favorite Kirby game of all time, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, also known as Kirby's Adventure in European and Australian regions, or Hoshi no Kabi Wii in Japan. This was the 9th main line Kirby game and the 24th game of the series, counting those promotional games like Kirby Slide. Now, I'm going to be upfront and say that I love this one, as it was the Kirby game that I first got on consoles, the first console Kirby game I ever owned, and it's also the first one I remember 100% completing multiple times. I'll also say that I am biased, but I always try to be unbiased, but I figure it's, just worth pointing out that for full transparency that I do have a bit of nostalgia goggles. But without further ado, let us dive into the development history, and frankly, this game likely has the most to say on it of any modern Kirby game. So Kirby's Return to Dreamland's development began immediately in 2000 after the release of Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards, which I've reviewed before if you'd like to learn more. This first prototype was initially planned for the Nintendo GameCube. This build called Kirby for Nintendo GameCube, or Kirby GCN, by the fanbase. First showed off in E3 2005, it was similar to Kirby 64, but with much better graphics and a more muted, down-to-earth color scheme, and multiplayer in the form of helpers. A gigantic robotic DDD, a water Kirby that had a design that came directly from Kirby Right Back At Ya anime, which, I have a whole series on if you want to learn more about that, and a bunch of now forgotten foes like Heat Fan, Flappy from Kirby's Air Ride, which I've reviewed before, Golem from Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, and a disturbing clown bomb guy. Speaking of bomb, in that game it would have worn a orange party hat with yellow patterns that would serve as the basis for the final design in Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Fire would have had a hat akin to that seen in the anime, while Hammer would have had a hard construction hat, something not seen before or since. The cleanability was also due to Return. There is some neat concept art, which would later be used for Morpho Knight and Magalore. However, it was not to be, as issues implementing multiplayer led to it being scrapped, though much of the series would be influenced by it. The second prototype was a full 3D game that looked a lot like Kirby Air Ride, but with prominent cartoonish outlines. It, however, failed to live up to HAL Labs' quality standards, with development only lasting from 2006 to 2007, being the shortest lasting of the three prototypes, but it would set the seeds that eventually would blossom into Kirby and the Forgotten Land. The third and final prototype was a fully 2D game with a storybook-style graphical design ethos. It was unique for having a treasure counter akin to that seen in the likes of Kirby Squeak Squad. While cancelled sometime in early 2010, it would be the basis for the final game, which abandoned the treasures but kept the super abilities, and indeed the art style would be used for the remake I'll eventually review. Some cut concepts from this final version of the game included an unused flower-like enemy, a super spark and super cutter ability. There was also meant to have a ninja challenge stage, but we'll talk more about challenge stages when we get to the gameplay segment of this video. In the end, Kirby's Return to Dreamland would be released for the Wii, first on October 24th, 2011 in North America, then in Japan on October 27th, 2011, next in the EU on November 25th, 2011, then in December 1st, 2011 in Australia, and lastly in South Korea on September 6th, 2012. Notable staff who worked on this game include Shinya Kumazaki, who was the director. Sound design was done by Hirokazu Ando and Jun Ishikawa. Kirby's voice was done by Makiko Ohomoto. Public relations were headed by Satoshi Ishida. Artwork was led by Tetsuya Notoya and the amazing Satoru Iwata as the executive producer. The game sold relatively well, with 1.79 million copies sold. Makes sense, the Wii printed money, and it got positive reviews, with even the infamous Dim Sterling giving it praise for what that's worth. But enough of this pre-review stuff. Let's start reviewing the game itself proper, starting with this game's story. So this game's story begins with Kirby having a cake being chased by King Dedede and Bandana Waddle Dee, or as some in the fanbase call him, Bandana Dee. Meanwhile, Meta Knight is just chilling reading a book. Suddenly, a portal in the sky opens up and catches everyone's attention as Kirby loses his cake, much to his chagrin. They look as the ship slowly breaks apart, crashing into the planet nearby. Going over to investigate, they enter into the ship, whose name is Lore Starcutter, and they see its owner Magalore knocked out. He goes over and wakes up the captain, who finds his ship in a horrible state. But Kirby, being the nice guy, goes over to him and offers to help. Magalore is overjoyed to see Kirby, King Deity, Bandana Wadley, and Meta Knight travel through Dreamland, collecting both minor energy spheres as well as major ship parts. Along the way, fighting foes like Wispy, Mr. Duder, Fatty Palfer, Gorath, and eventually facing a Grand Doomer, who is the leader of the Sphere Doomers, which plague you throughout the game. With all the pieces restored, Kirby, Magalore, and the gang leave to Halkendra, the home planet of Magalore, which is both a reference to HAL Laboratory, but also an allusion to the name for Mars used in C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, as well as a pun on the Japanese word Haruka, which means distant. Upon arrival, they get shot down by the dragon Landia. After going through the chemical wasteland known as Egg Engine, they go through the volcanic region known as Dangerous Dinner, where Kirby finally confronts Landia, who is the one who sent Magalore crashing down in the first place. With her defeated, the group cheer, but then Magalore descends down and picks up the Master Crown, which is a powerful artifact from the ancient days. It is revealed that, in fact, he was the villain and used Kirby to defeat Landia after failing to do so himself with the Lore Starcutter, and he plans to use the Master Crown to conquer the universe, starting with Dreamland as thanks to Kirby for helping him. He then goes through the portal, but then with the help of Landia, they fly through the another dimension, fighting and destroying Lore Starcutter, which, on one hand is a good fight, but also makes you kind of feel awful that all my hard work ended up backfiring. Then we see Kirby and the others confront Magalore, who uses dark energy to fight them. In the end, he is defeated thanks to the usage of teamwork and super abilities. But then it's revealed that the Master Crown is a living entity and brings Magalore back from death, using his undead corpse as a means to attack Kirby. In the EX mode, it's darker and referred to as Magalore's soul. In the end, however, Kirby beats this abomination, shattering the crown and causing Magalore to fade into nothingness. The dimension starts to collapse into nothingness, but Kirby and the others are saved by Landia and the reformed Lore Starcutter, who take the crew home before returning to Halkandra. This game story, in my eyes, is one of the best in any Kirby game I've so far reviewed. Sure, some say it's a bit of a ripoff of Milky Way Wishes, but that's unfair. Firstly, Magolor is way better than Marks, both in Kirby and in real life. He has a far more active role in the game, as unlike Marks, you can regularly talk to the guy in the spaceship. Interestingly, the guy's name comes from mage and the Japanese words Mahorla, which means wonderful place. This game also had, in my opinion, better pause screen text, as well as just better presentation thanks to the improved capabilities of the Wii compared to the Nintendo DS. Especially overall amazing are the cutscenes. Now let's discuss what some would argue is the most important aspect of any game, the gameplay. So, in terms of basic gameplay, Return to Dreamland sees us, well, return to a standard platformer. You can walk with the left or right D pad arrows, jump by pressing 2, hover by pressing it repeatedly in midair, inhale by pressing 1. It can be held down for a more powerful super inhale. From there, you can swallow by pressing down with something in your mouth or spitting it out as a star bullet. If the enemy has a copy ability, you'll get it. We'll return to those in a bit. You can slide by pressing down and 2, crouch by pressing down without something in your mouth. You can also swim and toss something by pressing 1. And you can guard pressing A, though not all attacks can be guarded against. Now, all this seems rather familiar. You might say it's a bit unnecessary to cover this, but I think it's warranted due to it being the basis for the controls of nearly all following Kirby games outside of, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and as such, by doing so, it means I won't have to do so again, at least for the next few games. Circling back to the copy abilities, they are thankfully now akin to those of Kirby Superstar Ultra and Superstar, with various attacks based on specific button combinations. Let us start with the returning ones. Fire is back and functions like before, but can now destroy metal blocks using the burn technique by dashing, which it couldn't before. Beam is back, and for the most part is the same energy beam whip before, but you can infinitely do the beam whip in midair via the revolution beam attack, though wind will push you around. Cutter functions as before, but you can now steer the cutter blade's direction slightly and charge it by holding the one button down. Ice is similar to before, but can now use Ice Skate while dashing to go over lava blocks and water. You can also have one new move created where Ice Ball, which is where you roll over enemies by dashing and pressing down +1. Stone is back and functions mostly the same as before, but now has a surprising amount of nuance to it, which it lacked even in Kirby Superstar. You can now do a hearty smash by pressing down +1 in midair, and a stone uppercut you can by pressing up +1. Very useful. It also has loads of stone forms. I will return to that later when we talk about graphics. The spark ability has been fully combined with plasma into one. You can now charge up for a mighty attack either by shaking the Wii remote or mashing the control pads. Also, as an aside, the motion controls in this game are marginal, and I don't really think they're worth talking about because, unlike in some other Wii games, they don't really harm the control in any way. Fighter returns and fights like always. Crash is a screen nuke which now can be slightly charged by holding down the one button and mashing the control pad. Bomb is the same little Unabomber he was before, but now he has kind of a lamer party hat instead of a blue Link hat. Hammer, my favorite, is the same hard-hitting ability before that can be used underwater and has a new dash attack called Hammer Twirl. Mike is yet again a 3-time screen nuke, but this time the third one can be charged up to be more powerful. Sleep is the same useless waste of time as it always was. High jump, the classic ability returns, last seen in Kirby's Squeak Squad, and while it's still, for the most part, not the most complex ability, it has a little more nuance than before, with the power of your jump depending on how long you hold the one button down, and you can now do it in midair. Given this was its last appearance in a mainline game, as of writing, I think it went out on a high point. Needle is another ability given a revamp, even if it's still somewhat limited. You can now hold your needles out indefinitely, stick to walls, use them to roll forwards with a dash attack, and by shaking the Wii remote or mashing the control pad, you can do what's called a needle burst, where you shoot out needles. And you can also shoot out one massive needle by pressing up and the attack button. Ninja, my beloved, returns in addition to the standard ninja attacks like knife throw from before. There's new attacks like stealth slash, where you dash forwards, hurting multiple enemies. Smoke screen, where you throw a bomb down, generating smoke that damages any enemies that are nearby. Blossom storm has you use cherry blossoms to kill, and stealth water gun is used from on top of the water, where you have a bamboo shoot that helps you spit water. Honestly, it's great to see, and I really enjoyed it. Parasol returns and set the standard for what it'll be like for the rest of the series. He, of course, can now do a parasail swing. Holding the button results in a parasail shield. Parasail drill has him charge forwards. Parasail dive is done by pressing down and using one in midair. Pressing up next to or near an enemy causes him to lift it up and spin it like a ball before tossing it away in what is called a circus throw. It can also be used underwater and will cause him to slowly drift downwards from off a cliff. Honestly, it's never been better. Tornado is back and has found a new nuance in this title. In addition to the basic tornado attack, you can do a tornado dash to do a quick lateral rush inside a tornado forwards that also damages enemies behind you. You can shoot mini tornado gusts both above and below you, as well as charge up your tornado attack. Wing is basically the same moveset from Superstar, but does a lot more damage and has more invulnerability frames. Last of the returning ones is Sword, and it honestly functions as before, and so it's just neat. In terms of new abilities, first is Whip. This Indiana Jones based ability can whip enemies with a whip. Do a 100 whip dash by sprinting forwards, and can perform a whip grab holding the button next to an enemy, which you can then beat up. This allows him to also grab items, which is honestly really neat. And frankly, I really like this ability, though it is my least favorite of the new guys. Leaf allows you to do a flurry of leaf based attacks as well as a guard that basically makes him invincible. You can also do a leaf uppercut. It's my favorite of all the new ones, but admittedly, it is OP. Spear gives him a spear that he can use to stab enemies, toss at them, poke them, can be used underwater, and even fly temporarily like a helicopter for a bit. Honestly, it's really great, but without question, my second favorite new copy ability has to be none other than Water. It's almost tied with Leaf, but it was really first seen in the anime, technically speaking, and I have to admit I do love the design there better than here. It just kind of comes off like a streamer in this game. In terms of abilities, he can spit out a wave. Water causes you to be able to surf while dashing over lava. You can also wave surf, which is a more powerful variant. You can hover in place, shooting water like a Super Mario Sunshine hover nozzle. He can release a geyser-like blast from his head, can summon the power of the rainbow, and lastly, underwater, it empowers your water gun. Just amazing. Then we have the super abilities, which are basically OP versions of copy abilities that allow Kirby to effectively destroy objects slash large amounts of enemies. Ultra Sword sees you summon a massive sword that can either be the standard variant, a cutlass, a cleaver, a shinai, which is a Japanese training sword, a fan with a Hau logo, Tona and Galaxia, which is, the sword that Meta Knight uses. Monster Flame is the second one you encounter and has you summon a fiery dragon, which you can slightly aim using the up and down arrows on the control pad. Flare Beam has you summon a large electric orb that you can control using the D-pad to break certain objects and light up blocks. Snowball is an ability that you encounter fourth that lets you become a snowball and barrel through your foes and sandcastles. Last but not least is Grand Hammer, which can be charged up to 3 levels and will have you slam down using a giant hammer, destroying enemies both directly and via shockwave. All of these have a time limit, but it's so generous you'll never run out. The super abilities add a lot of pizzazz, even if they can become a little bit repetitive and always end with a brief segment in the other dimension where you have to race against time in order to escape a wall of dark void matter before fighting a sphere doomer. In addition to Kirby, 3 other characters are playable. Meta Knight returns from Meta Nightmare Ultra and functions like a combination of wing and sword. Deity is playable for the first time and is basically Hammer Kirby with a larger range and the ability to do infinite hammer throws. Third and not least is Bandana Waddle Dee, who functions identically to the Spear ability, but doesn't fly, instead jumping indefinitely, which is, arguably even more impressive than flying. There's also a sequence where you ride Landia, and it's basically a shooter. Burst functions as a basic attack and is done by tapping 1. You can charge it for a much stronger burst, and therein there is the spiral dragon technique by pressing 2, which causes you to charge forward. So not really much to say about this sequence. It's fun, but not exactly the most mechanically detailed. In addition, there are several items you'll encounter throughout your adventure. First are some returning ones, like an invincibility candy that makes you invincible, a key that unlocks doors, maximum tomatoes that are full heal, food that doesn't heal as much, and 1-ups that give extra lives. In terms of new ones, there's the Maxim Tomato box, which is a box where you can throw to release a Maximum Tomato. Kind of redundant. Point stars return from Kirby Canvas Curse and set the standard for how they will be handled in all future games, with one exception we'll cover later. But let's talk about them now. Yellow stars give 1, red gives 10, and blue give 30 points. Get 100 and you get an extra life. Pop flowers are flowers that you walk past that can release food items or point stars. Their prism shield is a French horn that releases an energy shield that will guard you from threats above. It's fine, but the least useful in my experience. The transparency crystal turns you ethereal, allowing you to ignore enemies and go through certain walls for extra goodies. The Stomper boot is a clear allusion to Karibo's shoe from Super Mario 3. It allows you to jump over hazards, terrain, and destroy certain gold blocks. The balloon bomb is a bomb that slowly increases or balloons in size, and you must toss it the right way to destroy certain blocks. The candle will light your way in darkness and can destroy ice blocks. Lastly is Crackler, which can destroy metal blocks and harm enemies. One of the first items seen in the game, it's arguably one of the most useful and fun in my opinion, and helps you get the collectibles of this game, the energy spheres. These metaphorical batteries are scattered in each stage of the world. Some have many, some have very few. 13 are in Cookie Country, 16 in Raisins Ruins and Onion Ocean, 19 in White Wafers, 20 in Nutty Noon, 21 in Egg Engine, and 15 in Dangerous Dinner, leading to 120 in total, both in this mode and EX mode, but we'll talk about that later. These in turn do several things. They unlock challenge stages and subgames, which are accessible in the Lore Star Cutter, which is the hub world of the game. These challenge stages are a set of timed challenges where You have to collect coins, kill all enemies, and avoid taking damage in order to get a high score. There's one for sword, whip, high jump, bomb, water, wing, and a last one for the items. All are rather fun to do. Going on to the sub game, there are two. First is Ninja Dojo with 3 levels of difficulty, and it has you hit the bullseye using timing. It's fun and can be surprisingly challenging, especially in level 3 with all the decoys and gordos that it throws at you in addition to the target. It takes 115 energy spheres to unlock it. The second sub-game, Scope Shot, has you shoot at mechanical monstrosities. First is Waddle Tank, then there is Mecha Kawasaki, and lastly Robo Deity. Again, very fun to see these guys become more exposed slash battle damaged. It is unlocked after getting 30 energy spheres. After finishing each of these, depending on the story, you can get up to 3 extra lives. You can also get extra lives by doing the goal games, which are identical to the ones seen in Kirby's Adventure, where you have to time a jump, and depending on how well you do, you can get up to 30 point stars. Of course, this is just the base game. There's also the arena, which is a rematch against all the bosses and mini bosses of the base game. However, perhaps most substantive is Extra Mode, which sees harder versions of bosses and mini bosses that we'll talk about later. Your health is only at 60%. The super abilities timers run out faster, though that's almost never an issue. There are more enemies, which move faster and come in larger sizes. Food items and one-ups are rare. The Another Dimension segments move much faster, with the death wall being reddish. And speaking of the dimension segments, they're basically just these little bonus areas that you go through to get energy spheres. The challenge stages are also harder, and there is an additional set of bosses like HRD3, but we'll discuss that alongside the EX bosses in general later on. Then, lastly, there is the True Arena, which is a rematch against all the EX bosses with an additional extra one we'll talk about later. And you have less healing items, as well as less health overall. Something I've alluded to is the multiplayer of this game, in which up to 4 people can jump into play, selecting from the characters, and honestly, it's fun, even if it makes an already easy game even easier. You want at least one Kirby, though, as they help you get most of the energy spheres. Overall, the gameplay is astounding, bringing Kirby back with a bang, and honestly stands up perfectly to this very day. Now let's go on to the presentation, starting with the most obvious half, that being the graphics. So this game is what has been described as a 2.5D game, in that it uses 3D models and 3D backgrounds, but set upon a 2D plane. These often have a negative reputation for looking cheap and awful, and a lot of them do, honestly, especially during the PlayStation Portable phase. But Kirby's Return to Dreamland avoids this thanks to the bright color choice and simplistic design of a lot of things in this game. Plus, there's a neat attention to detail, like how extra lives have a crown on them in extra mode, or the animations Kirby does when idle, or all of the various forms that Stone Kirby can get. Of course, you got returning ones like the base stone, a star block, another star block, an 8-ton weight. There's also, a hand statue, which is a reference to Master Hand. There's also the returning Mount Fuji, and of course the returning Dream Hatcher HAL logo statue. There's also the returning Kirby statue and the Macho statue. There are, however, several new ones as well, such as a version that depicts Wham Bam Rock, a Rick Kynan Koo statue, the Dragoon statue from Kirby Air Ride, Pixel Kirby statue, which is kind of neat looking, There is what is called the legendary item statue that depicts the star rod, the magic paintbrush, and the triple star cane. And there's a statue called the strongest warriors in the galaxy that shows off Meta Knight and Galactonite. There's also a Mark statue. Cookie Country is a greens type region with rolling hills and some beautiful windmill trees that just rotate in the breeze. Stage 3 is mostly underground, while Stage 4 has the first Howl room of the game. Raisin Ruins is a more of a desert theme world with sand geysers and the ruins of civilizations built upon desert plateaus lost to time, with some nice color in Stage 2, which is an oasis. Overall, it's another great world. Onion Ocean is the underwater slash ocean world of the game. Starting off in a beachside stage 1, you go to a reef in stage 2 before descending deeper. Again, another great world with some night visuals that really set the stage. White Wafers is the ice world with some of the most beautiful backgrounds of any world in the game. Nutty Noon is a rather hard to place as it doesn't really fall into any particular trope. If anything, it combines aspects of clouds with a large tower. Egg Engine takes place in a abandoned factory, and frankly, it does play into the whole post-apocalyptic setting Kirby has. Stage 5 has a Howl room and would set the seeds for many future events. The last world, Dangerous Dinner, is the shortest, with only 3 levels, but they make up for it by being the longest, having a distinctly volcanic theme. With the first level having you dodge lava geysers, the second stage has you deal with an elevator sequence, and the final stage has you use the Ultra Sword to kill multiple hordes of mini bosses in a freaking volcano. The subgames both have their charm, with Ninja Jojo seeing all the characters don a ninja garb and Scope Shot taking place in some sort of wasteland. Now, I've heard some say that the graphics of this game are safe, and to be fair, I can see that in the first 2 worlds, but I have to say that tropes exist for a reason. You can have a solid level design that is not, entirely groundbreaking. This was an attempt to bring Kirby back, so it was a little safe slash standard, and is to my mind fine. Plus, Kirby design charm makes it way less generic than, say, the new Super Mario Bros. Series. With that, let's go on to the second half of the presentation, the music, and see how that has aged. Starting with the returning music, a lot here is great. The heavy metal Galactonite theme sounds better than ever before. When you do the rematches against the mini bosses in Nutty Noon Stage 5, which serve as this game's tower of mini bosses, has a remix of Deity's theme, and honestly, it sounds good. Kyan's theme gets a great remix in Indian Ocean, and Grape Gardens gets a beautiful variation in Nutty Noon. A remix of the Robo Deity theme from Kirby's Dream Course under the name of Pressure Panic shows up in a segment of Egg Engine Level 5, as well as a remix of the mini boss theme from Kirby 64 used as the mini boss theme for the last 2 worlds. But the vast majority of the OST is new. The adventure begins, the theme of Stage 1 in Cookie Country is just the perfect start to an adventure. The theme heard in the second stage, exploring a cave, stands out thanks to the usage of Mixolydian Sea. The theme of the third level, Woods Wayfarer, makes excellent usage of violins. The theme from Stage 3 really sounds like a Family Guy skit. Beyond the Hill, which is the theme for Stage 4 of Cookie Country, has a good looping tempo that comes off as being very uplifting in the third segment thanks to the usage of Pregos. Sandy Wilds, the theme of Raisin Ruins' first stage, really has a ziggy-zag Arabian vibe to it. The second stage's theme, Sunny with a Chance of Oasis, reminds me of ska slash rocksteady. Yes, that was an actual genre of music, not just a old TNT character. Shame the theme never really came back outside of Triple Deluxe, though. Now, Exotic Pyramid of Stage 3 of Raisin Ruins really has a sort of techno-Egyptian vibe. Vestiges of the Ancient is a jazzy song with heavy percussions at first and overall sounds good and is an allusion to an ancient race mentioned by Magalore. Crow in the Dark, first seen in Raisin Ruin Stage 4, is a really dark, eerie track held in dark areas. Summer sands and cool waves, the theme of the second stage in Onion Ocean, sounds like a high quality elevator music. Seabed diving heard in puzzle rooms of Onion Ocean is another good, very well done track. The theme for stage 4 of Onion Oceans, A Stroll on the Ocean Floor, is very cheery with a 4x4 rhythm. Snowball Scuffle, the theme of the first stage of White Wafers, really reminds me of Shiverstar from Kirby 64, thanks to the usage of clarinet. The theme for the second stage of White Wafers, On the Path of Frosty Roadblocks, is a really somber theme. The puzzle rooms in this world have slippery steps, a humorous theme that has a C minor. The theme, Tumbling Ice, in White Wafers is very fast paced and does make the situation sound a lot more serious as you dodge ice boulders. The next theme, Perfect Sledding Weather, honestly sounds great, but does come off as if it was originally meant for Raisin Ruins in terms of how it comes off. Freezing Temple, the theme of White Wafers Stage 5, is rather eerie slash wistful. Sky Vault 2 is a very nice theme heard in the first stage of Nutty Noon. Sky Tower, the theme for stage 2, is very victory inducing and was composed at the same time as Road to Victory, which is the theme for the arena in this game. Egg Engine themes like The Birthplace of Steel, Sounds of Scrap, and Techno Factory combined techno synth and heavy metal undertones to give off a feeling of an abandoned mechanical wasteland. The rush of the railway coaster really is far more energetic track thanks to using tambourines. Into the Underground Waterway really does kind of come off as a rave party. Interestingly, this theme originally played in the Another Dimension segments, which now play a completely different theme that invokes urgency. Underworld, the theme in Egg Engine Stage 4, is another creepy tone that reminds the player of the utter abandonment of this area. Haldera Volcanoes is seen in the first two stages of Dangerous Dinner, somehow both short yet fast paced. Limitless Power, the theme for the last stage of Dangerous Dinner, not only is a subtle allusion to Magalore's betrayal, but also just sounds amazing. The music played while fighting a mini boss is good, starting with a short tempo that plays it thrice before going into a D minor. Drawing heavily from Kirby's Adventure music, this mid boss theme just sounds amazing. The Sphere Doomers get their own frantic theme that works well given it's a separate dimension and just has a different feel than other mid boss fights. But I have to say, the theme while fighting the standard boss really gets you pumped, and I love it. The Grand Doomer gets its own theme. Not as good, but I like the usage of electric guitar. The theme while fighting Landia sounds a lot like a funeral procession, but the best two themes involve Magalore. The first, titled Welcome Your New Overlord, has a slower intro, but then transitions into a track with 8 bars. Really makes it seem like Magalore is giving us all to destroy you. Lastly, of note is Crown, which, in addition to alluring to the first letters of the seven worlds, really comes off as if you're fighting the Crown itself, who is using Magolor as a puppet of meat. Overall, the OST of this game is great. I think there isn't a single truly bad track here. Now that we've discussed the presentation, let us discuss the mini foes that you and your friends will encounter in this adventure. Alright, so starting with the main game's regular copyability list enemies, there is a number of returning foes, such as Waddle Dee, who also comes in a big variant, and an undead variant called Waypod, Broom Hatter, Bronto Burt, Squishy, Blipper, Shotzo the Cannon, Pacto, Ruff, Mumbies, which can't be inhaled. Neither can Scarfies be. Mopo, the Ghost, Kaboo, Gordo, Glunk, Como, Explosive Coconuts, Cappy, Bouncy, and Baboot, who's not been seen since Kirby's Dreamland 3. In terms of new copyability list enemies, well, firstly, there are some Halcandra variants of foes like Halcandra D's and Halcandra Bouncies. There's also Puppet Waddle Dees, which is a large puppet that is manned by three Waddle Dees. It has a little more durability, but otherwise kind of pathetic, and when defeated, they release the three Waddle Dees. Armor Waddle Dees is similar, but has more durability due to being made out of metal, and has a Halcandra variant that, while more mechanical, is not particularly tougher. Key D, also called Carry D and Wonky, has, by some sources, will carry a key and you have to catch it before it suicides itself into spikes or a bottomless pit, destroying the key as well. I like the monkey traits. There's a bigger variant of Bouncy called Big Bouncy that exists. Gigantio is a huge shot show that shoots fiery meteors and will return regularly. Colgio shoots ice balls. Volso shoots out spark balls. Boar is a gigantic eel. Iron bar boar is the same but mechanical and larger that functions basically the same and lives in lava. Pack Cloud is a sheep-based variant of Pacto that is tougher. Degout is in essence a robotic variant of Scarfy. There is a reddish variant that chases after you if you pick up a key, as well as a reddish variant of Scarfy that is behaving like this as well. Cerulean is a teal-like arrow guy that flies in short bursts. Claynicia is a snail guy that pops out at you. Balby shoots an arrow at Kirby and has a Halcandra variant. Barakuku is a large, fearsome green fish. Krabby is a amphibious crab-like creature that will try and snap at Kirby. Shelt is an armored blue guy that charges at you, but if you hit it, it'll destroy his armor and he'll try and flee. Walf is a little turtle guy that can walk on land and swim in water. Then there are a set of four Doomer enemies, only seen in the shooting segment with Landia. DARPA is the easiest. That'll basically just try to ram into Kirby. It has low health and is easy to kill. Dippa is slightly larger, reddish variant with a neat hairdo that will shoot bullets at Kirby. Duppa is a walker that will walk around on walls and vomit at Kirby. It's kind of neat. Lastly is Deppa, the largest of the four, and shoots similar bullets in a straight line, and when killed, it'll also shoot out four large spikes. The last category of copy ability-less enemies you meet are those you destroy using a super ability. There is the Bomb Machine, Burner Box, Drill Machine, Giant Floatzo, and Octopus, the Creepy Merman statues, Moai Block, which may be related to Kaboo, a red variant that shoots out fire, Strike Box, which is a robotic owl that will spit out icy blasts. It's kind of the oddest of the ones, but now let's go on to the common enemies that do give copy abilities when inhaled. Starting with the returning ones, there's Blade Knight that gives sword, Chili that gives ice, Walkie that gives mic, Flamer that gives fire, as does Hothead and Galbo, Knuckle Joe that gives fighter, Foley and Poppy Brothers Jr. that gives bomb, Needless and Tick that give needle, Naughty that gives sleep, Paracel Waddle Dee and Paracel Waddle Doo that give paracel, Waddle Doo on its own gives beam, Rocky gives stone, Sir Kibble gives cutter, Sparky gives spark, Starman gives high jump, and Twister gives tornado. There's Tick that gives needle. In terms of new guys, Leafin is a plant guy and Bulby a bulb guy, both of which give leaf. One would return several times, the other not. Elixir was a variant of a flamer that gives electricity. Water Galbo is a blue variant of a Galbo that gives, well, water, as does Pluida, a blob with two creepy eyes. Searches is a bomb that gives crash. Snowl is a owl that drops ice poo and gives ice. Jacker is a weird clown boomerang thing that gives cutter. Moonja is a ninja dude that gives ninja. Owlgulf is an owl that gives wing. Pierce is a bee guy that will try and spear Kirby with a spear. He gives spear, as does Lancer, who is a purple knight that attacks Kirby with a trident. Soldori is a flying sword that gives sword. Totenga is a cactus that gives needle. And lastly is Whippy, a tiger cat with a long tail that gives whip. Then there are the last category of common enemies, those that give super abilities. First is Super Blade Knight, that gives Ultra Sword and has a larger sword with more spiked armor. Super Chili is a chili with a larger set of bells that gives Snowball. Then there's Super Hothead that gives Monster Flame. Super Waddle Doo that has a darker coloration that gives Flare Beam, and there's also this random hammer object that gives Grand Hammer. Shame they didn't come up with a common enemy for Hammer quite yet, but now let's go up a level and discuss the mini-bosses. In terms of mini-bosses, only one is returning, that being Bonkers, and he functions like he did before, trying to smash Kirby with his hammer, jumping in place, throwing explosive coconuts, but he can now do a hammer spin as well. At low health, his hammer spin goes on longer. He can throw 3 explosive coconuts instead of 1, jump 3 times instead of once, and use a hammer flip. His EX form has a black and reddish color scheme. It's much more aggressive, as he'll always using hammer flip, and when he does so in the air, he can hover in place and toss explosive coconuts, one of which will be huge. Honestly, it's a great reintroduction for a classic foe. Super Bonkers, however, there's not much to talk about. The normal form of Super Bonkers just looks like Bonkers, but with pink, fiery details on his shoulders and blackish gray ones on his legs. He's basically just Bonkers, but faster. His EX form is similarly unchanged. Honestly, it's the most disappointing mini-boss of them all. He's just kind of there, really, for the super ability. And they didn't really take advantage of him being harder to beat. Going to the new guys, first is Dubior, a UFO creature that is bright yellow eyes and a silverish coloration. It hovers, making it a little annoying to hit. It can try to charge a Kirby, summon Dubior Juniors, though they're unnamed outside of the fan base. It will also try and hit Kirby with lightning as well as shoot out electric orbs. The original color scheme is a reference to Rob, which was a promotional thing that Nintendo did for the original NES. The EX version is a lot more erratic in that it will move around much more quickly. It will summon 4 Dubior Juniors. Dubior EX will also loop in the middle of its ram to try and catch Kirby off guard. In Instead of just striking the ground, it will also occasionally strike the ground with lightning and move towards the player. Honestly, a great encounter, and he gives the spark ability. Then we got Gigant Edge, a giant knight in green that gives sword. In terms of attacks, his slash attack has him perform a large vertical slash. His rush attack has him charge with his sword across the arena. Shield Guard has him raise his shield, becoming invincible for a time. Sword Shot has him pull out his sword, charge it, and slam the ground, creating a shockwave. The EX form is golden. In addition to generally being faster and tougher, his attacks have been altered. The slash attack can now be done up to 6 times in a row. He can now change direction while doing a rush attack. His sword shot can now see him jump up and slam the ground, and he has an entirely exclusive new attack, the 3-way short shot, which has him charge up and unleash his sword beams 3 times upon slamming down on the ground. Honestly, he's a really great encounter. Kibble Blade is a much larger variant of Sir Kibble with silver armor and red hands. It can throw a giant cutter using his cutter boomerang move. With Charge Cutter, he will charge up before throwing a giant boomerang. Head Tackle has him step back, then charge headfirst across the arena until he hits a wall. Jump Cutter Slash has him jump up and throw a blade in a diagonal direction. His EX form has black armor and alters his attacks. He will jump towards the center of the arena and use his attack move more regularly. He's also much faster and has 3 whole new attacks. High Speed Head Tackle has him charge very quickly forwards. Hyper Boomerang has him charge up and throw an extra large boomerang, which unlike the others cannot be inhaled. Cross Boomerang has him toss 2 boomerangs in different directions. Overall, another great fight, and it's always fun to see new mini-bosses that give copy abilities like Cutter. King Dew is, true to its name, a much larger version of Waddle Doo that has a thicker hairpiece. It has the lowest amount of attacks. With Beam, it'll shoot and release a Beam Whip. Rush has it run forwards to the other end of the arena. Wave Beam has him charge up and release a large circular beam. Jump Beam has him leap into the air and fire beam at Kirby / the player. His EX form with a pale Zero-like body, red feet, and bloodshot eyes, in addition to being generally faster, has very few additions. It can do a rush attack twice in a row, shoot out a wave beam multiple times in quick succession. It's probably the easiest of the mini-bosses, but still, I think it's a fun encounter. Mondo is a large rock monster that looks like a small mountain with sandals. He can charge after Kirby. He can use a jump to crush Kirby with. He can have a homing jump where he uses a whirlwind to float in the air, targeting Kirby. The last is where we see him spin around in an invincible manner. His EX form is very similar but gray in coloration and has a few additions. In addition to being faster, he can now increase his size when he does his jump attacks and attack with jumps much more. It's honestly a great fight, even if it's not the most mechanically complex. Water Galboros is a much larger version of Water Galbo, with a more shark-like head and neat orange details. In terms of attack, he'll shoot water waves and globs of water in various arcs, like 1 in mid-range or 2 at longer one. It can also charge at Kirby after winding up, as well as leap at him. Once at less than half health, it'll shimmy in place, showering the area in water drops. Once at half health, he will shoot 3 shots at any one time before doing 2 simultaneous shots of water, and change in direction when he's charging at Kirby. His EX form gets a heavy metal makeover with new reddish coloration, eye shadows, and more prominent spikes. He can now spout water shots in greater numbers, leap more erratically, and gains the ability to do small lunges that, if they touch Kirby, will have him swallow, damaging him, unless they shake the Wii remote to remove the D-pad. Fun fight and good. But then we have, without question, the most diverse of the mini bosses, the Sphere Doomers. No, not depressed people, but demons that contain energy spheres. There are a total of 4 variants, each with an EX version, so let us cover them now and group them together one at a time to avoid repetition. First is the regular purple variant that has 2 tail feathers. It has a glide attack which causes it to dive across the stage. Then it can shoot out an energy bullet. In EX mode, it often only has a single eye, sharper wings, and replace their head fluff with horns. It moves faster with a zigzagged pattern. Its energy bullets fire much more, and the newest addition is a mini black hole, which he can summon a small black hole with. Not as bad as you think it would be, though, and it only does it after reaching half health. The fired sphere doomers are reddish with 3 tail feathers in addition to the basic attacks of the basic doomer. Albeit the bullets can give fire, it can also engulf itself in fire and torpedo a Kirby. His EX form can alter this mid-flight in case Kirby tries to dodge. The spark sphere doomer, which is green in coloration, has 4 tail feathers. Again, in addition to having the attacks of the base doomer, in which these projectiles now give spark, there is the electric shock, which has it charge and then move from one side of the area to another, releasing lightning strikes, and spark energy shot, where it charges up and releases 3 large electric ball projectiles. The EX version is faster and has a new attack, Swirling Electric Shock, where it summons a group of 4 electric orbs that it rotates around itself as goes from side to side. Lastly, there's the Ice Sphere Doomer, which is white in coloration and has 5 tail feathers. In addition to the base Doomer attacks, which now give the ice ability if you inhale the spheres, it can do Ice Crush, which causes it to release a series of 3 icy bursts. The EX form, in addition to being able to summon black holes at high health as opposed to other EX Doomers, which wait until they're at half health, it can also flip the screen upside down using Screen Flip, and there is Ice Crush, which sees it summon ice shards that try to crush you. Overall, the Doomers are pretty good, if a bit repetitive since you do fight them a lot. Now let us go up a level again and discuss the bosses, starting with the 2 that are returning. There are only 2, luckily. First is, of course, Wispy Woods. His first phase has him drop apples and spit out 4 or 2 air bullets. Nothing, particularly hard. The second phase has him expand and start to inhale for a few seconds, and you have to run away, lest he chews on you, causing damage, and you'll have to shake the Wii remote to escape. He also has a massive shake that causes him to drop enemies like Gordos, Bronto Birds, Waddle Dees, and Como. His EX form has a color scheme last seen in Wispy's Revenge with a purple leaf color and darker gray bark color. His apple drop now includes poisoned apples. His air bullets are purple and they move in a more erratic fashion and size. His inhale is extended and he can now drop enemies while doing so, and he can also now drop Scarfies as well as the base enemies. His sole new attack is him sticking out roots when Kirby is near him. Not the hardest fight even in EX mode, but it's a great intro boss, and it's always nice to see a returning foe like Wispy. The second returning foe, Galactonite, is the opposite, a challenging encounter with loads of fighting techniques. Overhead slash is a single slash. Triple slash sees him doing 3 slashes in a row. Hyper rush has him release a crescent-shaped force beam. Crescent beam shot has him do that multiple times in a row. Spin slash sees him perform a horizontal spin slash. Drill stab has him thrusting his lance. Upwards Slash has him thrust upwards. Night Spin has him jump and attack with a vertical slash. Spin Slash has him perform a horizontal spin slash. Down Thrust has him thrust downwards. Final Beam Sword has him jump into a spinning slash, leaving a shockwave when he lands. The Tornado Attack sees him spin around like a tornado, throwing Kirby into the air if hit by it. Tornado Slash has him summon a massive tornado attack akin to Meta Knight. Energy Sword has him summon Energy Sword constructs that bounce off the floor. Rising Spike has him fly to the middle of the stage and summon lightning. The second phase not only makes a lot of these higher damage attacks more common, but new ones are also added. Revolution's sword has him fire a laser beam from his lance that covers nearly the entire screen and it's hard to dodge. 12 Energy Shower has him fly into the background and fire energy swords at Kirby/the player. Overall, it's a really nice, challenging encounter and honestly unexpected. Now let's go on to the new faces. First up is Mr. Duder, a genie guy whose bluish skin reminds me of Aladdin. In terms of attacks, his magic item throw has him summon then juggle 3 items, which he will then throw at Kirby. This attack becomes more dangerous in the second phase, where the items can be multiple things, like Gordos, bombs, and skulls. Tornado attack sees him spin into a tornado and try to stomp on the player. Bound movement has him do 3 jumps around the arena trying to hit Kirby, while the third and last one leaves stars behind that can be spat back out at him. Hat magic has Mr. Duder pull his hat off and release Duder snakes, or in the second phase, baboots. This is an allusion to a Japanese comedian, Chopin Ikari, who is well known for his outfit and catchphrase, "Red snakes come on." So his second phase has him using a sky band where he will leap repeatedly into the air up to 5 times. Rocket Punch has him punch forwards a few times as well. His EX form has him growing a mustache, a sunburn, and angry eyebrows, likely due to the sunburn. This time his Duder skulls are on fire, and his attacks are much faster and can now, via tornado attack, spin around along the ground, forcing you to go over them. He can also try and grab you, therefore causing to juggle the player, and his punches have fire. I like Mr. Duder. He's, a fun, if a little easy encounter that can give bomb. The third boss, Fatty Puffer, true to its name, is an obese pufferfish. Not as fat as a Pitmonk, but still quite rotund. He will try to roll into Kirby, leap into the air to crush Kirby, spit out Fatty Puffer Juniors, which are a new enemy with so little to talk about, that much like with Duder Skulls and Duder Snakes, I didn't talk about them when discussing common enemies prior to this, but he will also spit out water that can give the water ability as he grows even fatter somehow on half health that he can take up nearly half of the stage. And he starts to do new attacks like a balloon attack, which causes him puff up and roll around. Water Cannon has him shoot out a huge stream of water and stalactite droppings, which sees him stomp the floor and cause stalactites to fall on Kirby. Extra mode has him become orange and with a more crown-like coral growth. His attacks are longer, with his rolling tackle can now turn around to hit Kirby in case they happen to dodge. He can now shoot out more water bullets. For some reason, his jumps are able to home Kirby. He has a larger water cannon that can try and aim at Kirby. Overall, Fatty Puffer is another great encounter that's, again, a step up from the last ones. Though I have to say the white eyes you get when he dies is just kind of creepy. The boss of White Wafers is Goliath, whose name is the combination of gorilla and Goliath, the biblical character. Not entirely accurate given Kirby is 8 inches tall and this guy is barely taller than him, but anyway, he looks like the Japanese snow monkey in his regular encounter. In terms of the fight, he can jump back and forth between the two walls. On those, he can throw snowballs that give ice. He can try to punch Kirby using his Mr. Stretch Armstrong type arms and to try to hip spam Kirby. The second phase has him go Super Saiyan. No, I'm not joking, really. He gets golden hair, and he can now make icicles drop on you. He can do a Kamehameha of ice at you, and just jumps around a lot more and is just faster. His EX mode looks more like a mandrill due to the black face he's put on. Oh no, he's going to get canceled for that. In addition to just being faster, he can now do a spinning punch stretch, Armstrong style. And can now do, in addition to Kamehameha, he can now do the Spirit Bomb in ice. Honestly, this is a really fun encounter. It's the most challenging one we've encountered so far, and I just think he's a great callback. Then in a Nutty Noon, the boss is Grand Doomer, who is a leader of the Doomers and kind of resembles Quetzalcoatl. In terms of attacks, he can glide like a normal Doomer, but alter it to be lower as to prevent Kirby from ducking beneath. He can shoot orange energy bullets in various configurations. With the big energy bomb, he drops 4 big fire spheres that will explode. You can super inhale them then if you want. Dimensional Hole Swim Summon has him summon 4 dark rifts, one of which he will come out of, and you gotta dodge them. Though he does have them fade out, so it's relatively easy to know which one is going to be it. Dimensional Uppercut has a dark rift appear beneath Kirby on the ground, and you have to dodge this lest it gnaws on him. At his second phase, he'll go into the background and machine gun spheres at you. It's honestly a fun encounter. His EX/extra mode fight, while only slightly faster, is much more deadly, as he can now fire larger numbers of energy bullets. The big energy bomb, even though it's only dropped 1, will now have a residue after exploding that crosses the entire screen. His dimensional hole attack is a lot harder to dodge as they all move around and stay open. His second phase, upon, getting to half health, in addition to the machine gun, he can now do a burning attack like Fire Sphere Doomer and Ice Crush against Ice Doomer. In both of these cases, there is a third phase where it will attempt to shield itself, turning into a hard ball. It'll jump around and in EX mode turn into a fireball that will try and slam a Kirby. It will summon enemies. These include Blade Knight, Bouncy, Broom Hatter, Kaboo, and Ruff, Shelt, Shotzo, Waddle Dee, who can break the fourth wall by waving at the player, and a Super Blade Knight. EX adds Armored, Waddle Dees, Gordos, and Scarfies. You have to use the super ability to beat him. Overall, I would say that this is the best of the Doomer fights. Continuing on to Metal General, who is the boss of Egg Engine, it is a machine that was abandoned by its creator, who we shall meet later in the series. In terms of a fight, he can, via Beam Saber Slash, use a lightsaber to hit Kirby with. Electric Shock Needle has him fly into the air and turn on a shield that shoots out bolts in a zigzag pattern. He can shoot out missiles via rocket launcher, and using Beam Saber rotation attack, he spins his swords rapidly and dashes forwards. Once at half health, he begins to stutter/spark. In addition to being faster and shooting out more missiles and spark bolts, he's got 4 new attacks. With Search Bomb, he'll toss 3 mines that explode after a bit. He can also deploy 3 drones that will pursue Kirby. Electroshock Shuttle Loop has him put up that shield I mentioned earlier and charge at Kirby. And with destruction missiles, he will summon a giant rocket and ride it through the air cowboy style, attempting to ram Kirby before falling down. If inhaled, it can give the crash ability, which he can use against him. His EX form is red in coloration, moves/attacks are faster, and will utilize many of the second phase attacks in its first phase. His second phase has him do a missile triple, which is akin to that earlier missile attack I mentioned, but he will summon 3 of them, and only the last one will he ride like a cowboy. In addition, he has this sort of lightning strike, which has him toss mines that will explode with a lightning bolt and can give spark. His missiles can give bomb. A fun little detail is that when taking damage, he has this little pop-up that'll show the damage you're given, plus or minus a few points for variety. Overall, he's a really thrilling encounter. Speaking of EX mode, there is an additional boss after beating Metal General. HRD3 appears, and this guy may be familiar as it's basically a recolor of the DDD Robo from the unreleased Kirby GCN I discussed much earlier in this video. Robo DDD himself did end up showing up in Kirby Mass Attack, and the two are considered to be separate entities. HRD3 has a reddish coloration, and in terms of attacks, with Destroyer Rush, it slams its fist and drill in an attempt to crush Kirby. Head Missile Rain has his headpiece open and Metal General fire missiles. The Heavy Robot I-Beam has him sweep the stage with lasers from the eye. Heavy Laviat has him spin around with his arms stretched out. Phase 2 has him take damage and add some attacks. Howl Ray is a huge beam attack that you have to dodge. The Heavy Robot Dancing has him hover across the stage. He, in the attack called Dive Storm, has him body slam the player. Destroyer Punch has him move very fast as well. Honestly, it's a fun surprise that was a really good encounter, and I love how it takes more and more damage as you do more and more damage to the foe. Then we have Landia, who is an orange dragon that appears to be 1 but can split into 4 upon reaching the second phase, though it might recombine a few times depending on how long it takes. Fire Breath has them spit fireballs. Tail Attack has them striking with wing/tail. Glide has them try and dive at the player. There is Twin Breath, where he has 2 of the heads breathe fire. Wind Cutter has them summon a torrent of wind that pushes Kirby away and summons cutter blades. Upon reaching the second phase and splitting up, they can fly in a grid formation and charge up these sort of spark attacks. Fire Run has them breathe fire down at Kirby, and Formation Pass has them do sort of a hot potato with a fireball. The EX mode is purple, and true to its name, the attacks are extra fast and larger fire breaths can occur. There's also via quadruple glide attack, has all of them dive at Kirby. I love this dragon. They're a really good pre-ultimate fight. Now let's go on to the best encounter of the entire game, that being the final boss. First we got Lore Starcutter, which you fight while riding Landia. Something I like is how each of the attacks are based off a specific piece you've collected along the way. Emblem Shot has him shoot projectiles from its emblem. It can go into the background in a manner similar to Zero from Kirby's Dreamland 3, where it'll shoot at him. Or Rain has it shoot out its ores as a sort of missile attack. Wing Boomerang has him throw wings at the player, and Mast Storm has it fire a massive tornado from the sail. The second phase introduces two new attacks. Energy Sphere Bullet has it fire spheres. The blue ones move forwards, but the red ones target the player. Spike Barrier Tackle has it activate a shield and charge forwards. The EX mode is blacker in coloration and generally more aggressive, tossing two wings at once and can now fire golden orbs in the energy sphere attack that fly into the background and then target Kirby. Overall, it's a really good fight that makes me sad to attack our former friendly ship. Going on to the Magalor fight. Now, donning a form akin to Nightmare with cloudy bodies and a floating hand, and a crown that moves around. In terms of attack, he can shoot magical dark energy spheres, summon deadly needles from portals, fire spinning fire bolts, while in the background, he can open a rift and send doomers to fly at Kirby. After reaching half health, he has two new attacks. He can fire a huge laser blast called Magalore Cannon, and he can also open a black hole that will try and suck Kirby in. If he doesn't dodge it, of course. His EX form turns a red and blackish color with a white face. He has all the attacks of the base form, but is generally much faster, and much like a Grand Doomer in both modes, there is a third phase that is invulnerable except to super copy abilities. In the regular mode, this will be Monster Flame, Flare Beam, and then ending with Ultra Sword. In EX mode, this is Snowball, Grand Hammer, and then ending with Ultra Sword, so not really that much of a difference. After his defeat, he is resurrected by the Master Crown, which has grown more eldritch in look and has a pair of wings. In terms of attack, first is Calling Shot, where it will juggle up to 5 enemies and toss them at Kirby. Its needles are bigger, so is its cannon and magic spheres more numerous. Its another dimension attack has it draw a stencil in the background that will effectively become a sort of highly damaging material. And in the second phase, he uses warped versions of super abilities like Monster Flame, Flare Beam, and the Ultra Sword. In addition to Magalore Cannon, which has Magalore use a cannon blast, which he shoots into a sort of portal, which will then transport it across the entire arena. His mouth eye also starts to show up, and that's kind of creepy. In EX or Extra mode, it is replaced by Magalore's Soul, which has a much more muted color scheme and larger, more spiky crown. His attacks are much faster, he can flip the screen, which is annoying. In addition, he does an unusual combination of the snow ball and grand hammer attack, which is really unexpected, as you'd think they would do both separately, but no, they combined them, and that was kind of neat. This has to be, in my humble opinion, the best final boss this series has ever had. It's not unfairly difficult, but also not a complete easy cakewalk. Plus, the music and atmosphere is just amazing and has a highly varied attacks. As you can see, this game has an amazing selection of foes, both reintroductions of classic ones and new faces, some of which would go on to become mainstays, others not so much. Now let us wrap up this video with the completion requirements and my final overall thoughts on the game as a whole. Overall, as I've stated before, this is my absolute favorite Kirby game of all time. Now, sure, Kirby Superstar Ultra is close, but this one is more involved, I think, in terms of gameplay, and honestly works better as a whole instead of a set of mostly independent games. This is an absolute must-play for anyone who's a video game fan or a Kirby fan or just likes to play a fun game. And you can play it in several ways. There's, of course, the Wii release that I already talked about near the beginning of this video, but there's also the Wii U release for the Wii U Digital Store. First in Japan on January 28th, 2015, then the EU on February 17th, 2015, next in Australia on February 19th, 2015, and lastly in the US on July 30th, 2015. There's also the remake, and while I do think it's the least changed between the two, I think it's best to treat it as its own thing, and I'll save my thoughts until I get to it. However, more so than any other remake, I think that the original Hero still holds up as a solid experience and hasn't really aged at all. Now, this was a long video, and hopefully the next one won't be as long, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if you liked the video, liked it, but if you loved it, consider subscribing and sharing it around. I'm the Dark Master. Take care and have a wonderful day.